for the reports in Power BI. So if you're familiar with Navision accounts, for example, you might know that you can create subtotals in your chart of accounts by posting ranges of accounts, like here with 2 dots in them, and also with pipes in the middle to just add single accounts or range of accounts to them. And here, as a starting point, if you have organized your accounts like this, you can just use one of my functions for my blog post to come up with an allocation that basically splits up all the defined areas, like you see here, and creates and allocates each account number to the final reporting line. So the row numbers you see here to the left are basically reporting lines. And later on in the data model, you will see that your fact tables, they usually have an accounts table belonging to them with additional metadata information. And you can then basically create a bridge table that allocates the accounts allocation table that basically allocates each account to one or more reporting lines. So if I basically, you see here that these accounts belong to 500 and so on. So if we go back to the blog post, like here, what we can do is just grab the function code from the web page here down to the right. I click on View Raw with my mouse, and this opens up a window where I can copy the code more easily. I click Control and C. And if I then go back to Power BI and go to the query editor in there, I can just then create a new source with a blank query. And if I then go to the advanced editor, I replace everything what's in there with the copied code. And now I give this guy a name. I call it FN for function nav account transformation. So this is basically a function in my Power Query. And if I take my accounts table in here, this is my starting point. And let's just see how we apply it. So what I do is I reference this table like so. And now I'm gonna add a column where I invoke this function. So what I'm effectively going to do is I say, well, to each row of my table here, invoke this function that I've just copied, which is called FN accounts transformation. And there you see that 3 windows pop up or fields pop up. 2 of them are optional. And one is mandatory. So the mandatory parameter is the column that I want to apply this function to. And I'm gonna check the type of reference to be a column in my table, but I don't want to apply it to row number. I just want to apply it to the column parts over here. And in the optional parameters, I could put in figures if the pipe was actually a different sign, and also the dots, if they were different signs than the ones that you know from Navision, you could put them in here, but that's not necessary in our case. And I just click OK. And then you can see here that we have lists created for each row where we see the accounts. Here we just have 2 accounts. And here, for example, where we have 7 until 12, we have created a list of numbers from 7 to 12. Now I just have to expand these rows and have a nice allocation of accounts to the reporting rows at the end. But if we look closely back to our original table here, in this case here, we have additional type of aggregations in here, and these are so-called roll-ups. So if we look here, we have income defines where 2 accounts belong to, and we have cost of goods sold where just 1 account belongs to. But then comes the contribution 1 row, and the contribution 1 row is defined as a roll-up where the row 100 and the row 200 belong to. So these are not accounts, but these refer to row numbers that sit in our definition table definition here. So these guys basically require a recursive approach, because if you go down here now under marketing, okay, marketing is just a simple sum, so we just reference rows where only accounts belong to. But if we go to row 900, for example, where we define the profit and loss before tax, we see that we are referencing the row number 300, and the row number 300 itself has been a roll-up already. So theoretically, we could have multiple levels of roll-up in a definition like this, which is basically something like a parent-child definition, but a bit more complicated, I would say. But nonetheless, this is quite a typical setup that you might come across in finance. So these recursive things are a bit more demanding, but I've created a function for that as well. I haven't published it yet, so I just uploaded it an hour ago or so it's really exclusive. You can just go to my GitHub and copy this function over here. And if I copy this function code and go back to Power Query and my Power BI, and again create a new query and copy the code in there, I have a new function that I'm going to call fn full roll-up. And in there again, I have one mandatory parameter, which is my table. And then I have two optional parameters for the parent and child column names. And let me just see what we're gonna apply it on. So our parent column name here is called row number, and the child column name is parts. So if I apply it to this input table, nav account schedule, this is my input table, and this is row number as the parent column and parts as the child column name, and invoke this function. Yeah, then I have the forfeit effect. Why didn't it work? I'm always too let me see. Let me just see why it didn't work. I think I tested it before, but sorry guys. Let me just try it. Let me just try it with this function again once. Otherwise, I have to adjust it. So I apply it on the nav account schedule. And my parent column name was row number. And this was parts. Sorry about it. I don't know what I broke just before. Just before the session. So this is what we should have seen. I will, after the session, I will just adjust the function. Sorry about that. But in there, we are basically using the list generate function, where we apply, where we do a merge with where we merge the tables with themselves as long as we basically went through the whole hierarchy. So the core of this function is we start with this accounts table, and then we do a nested join where we join the parent with the child column on a join kind inner. And the join kind inner means that only those rows will be returned where both tables have a match. And these matches, they will get less and less until we get to the end of the parent-child hierarchy. And then the evaluation stops and we get a full breakout on all accounts allocated to the reporting lines, basically. So sorry about the demo. Are there any questions with regards to this method? Or are you happy just to grab the functions and apply them to your figures?
As I say, there's nothing in the chat at the moment, but if anyone does have any questions, feel free to drop them in.
Okay. So another question that came up recently was an aspect that refers to intercompany reconciliation. So often So just saw in the question in the chat here whether we should expect performance troubles. I don't think so, because this recursion is going to be applied on chart of account tables or on record definition tables, which are usually not longer than a couple of hundred or thousand rows, and you shouldn't expect any performance issues there. So we're not going to apply it to the actual figures. We're just going to apply it to the accounts. So that shouldn't give you any trouble. So one requirement in reporting in larger companies is that in holding companies is that companies under each other are doing transactions before the final transaction towards the third-party customers are made. And these so-called intercompany transactions have to be eliminated if you look at the big picture where you take all companies together, basically. So one requirement that came up recently was that in reporting, when we just select one company, we want to see all transactions, including the intercompany transactions. So here, for example, company 2 has a profit and loss of 20,090,000 euros, and the company 1 has the same result. So including intercompany transactions, both companies have the same results. But once I select both companies together, then we see the results of them without intercompany transactions. So you see here that the results have changed. So this was in a requirement where the measure basically should detect dynamically if a single company was selected or if all of the companies have been selected. And now we can just check out the measure and see how this has been defined. So first, we check if multiple companies are selected, and therefore we count the rows of the company table and filter on all selected companies. And if that is larger than 1, we know that multiple companies are selected, and we get a true back here, and otherwise we get a false. And then in the final check, what we do is to calculate our original measures if this multiple companies selected is true. And we only filter where the transaction has an intercompany sign of no, and otherwise we return the full hierarchy measure. So the key here is to use the all selected function to determine whether I just have one selection made or multiple selections in my report here. So this allows you to dynamically make selections depending on what the users have chosen in the report. So I see there's another question in the chat that probably refers to the previous question. When does the function run and populate the new column? Once saved, or when the data set is viewed? So the I've defined the function here in the query editor. So this script basically runs as soon as we load the data into the data models. So as soon as I click close and apply, the new column will basically be evaluated and calculated, and that's nothing. Once this is done, nothing the user does or so will affect this calculation. I hope that answers the question. Another scenario that is a requirement that we only show budget or forecasts when they are relevant, for example. So a typical scenario is that now, basically, in autumn, many companies are creating their budget for the next year. And that means they make a plan for the whole year from January until December. And once the year starts, this budget will be re-evaluated, and people will consider if that is still a realistic plan for the year or if things have changed, and they expect a different outcome of the year. And those plans are often called forecasts. And so they are also done during multiple times a year. So while it is perfectly okay to have comparisons where forecasts and budget are shown for the whole period, sometimes you just want to see the budget for the months that have already been passed, and you want to see the forecast only for the upcoming months, like so. And in order to do that, you can basically have a table like you see down here, where you say, I want to see my actuals for month 1 until 12, and my budget shall only be shown for January till May, and the forecast for June until December. And the measure that is able to show this here dynamically, basically, or data-driven. So as soon as you change the values in your master table in here, you will see these values changing as well. So let's see how the forecast is defined. If I click on the forecast measure and zoom in a bit, I will just define the from month and until months by filtering my scenario table. And then I have to apply a filter to my final measures, where I say apply this filter from the scenario table to my date table. Everything that's larger from the from month and less than until months for all the forecasts there are. So this will basically give you a nice filter view for different scenarios. And another requirement that you can see fairly often is the requirements to publish profit and loss statements in Power BI. And that's actually something that is not very trivial. So let's just start to try to create a profit and loss statement from our first example over here. So let me see. Let me just see where our freshly created table went. Let me just go back. Okay. Let me just see. So here we had our table where we rolled up all accounts basically to their reporting lines, all accounts for all groups. And see. Let me just see. Oh my God. Okay, so here we have our all accounts for all groups where we have an account number and the parents as the reporting lines. And if I combine the account number with my, check my account, with the account key over here, just so that we have to make it a text column, just make it a text column. And load the table again. And what I'm going to do now is to connect this table on the account number with my chart of accounts table. So in the chart of accounts table, every account is just is there just once. And here in my all accounts for all groups, I have the account number multiple times as often as it belongs to one of the reporting lines. And my chart of accounts table is then connected to my actuals. So theoretically, I have all the right connections in my accounts table. So if I put my my reporting row numbers in here. Just Sorry about it. I think I have to explain it a bit differently. So let's just try to describe the challenge of the profit and loss a bit differently. Sorry about that. A typical requirements for profit and loss is that you show accounts to certain groups, but also show percentages, for example. This, what you can see here, is cost of goods sold. This is a percentage of cost of goods sold in relation to the income. And if you see here, you can navigate to a master view where you also only see subtotals of income, cost of goods sold, percentages. Then you see another group of costs, group of accounts with total media costs, and so on. And then down here you see a profit and loss line. And the profit and loss line is basically all the income subtracted by all the costs that have occurred until this row, basically. And if you want to see the details and drill into the details, you usually only want to see the accounts to subtotals that have the character of an account group. But if you see the subtotal of a profit and loss, you usually don't expect to see any accounts in there. So you only want to see your accounts once in your profit and loss statements, and you want to see them at their respective subtotal. So we have basically 3 different types of subtotals here. One is an account group. The third subtotal is a percentage that doesn't show any detailed accounts. And the third subtotal is basically a running total of all accounts that have been that belong to the groups that are above the certain row. And here you see we also have some tax occurred, and the next subtotal, which is called profit and loss after tax, that basically gives you the profit and loss with the tax amounts subtracted. And this is definitely what you see here is a matrix visual, but there's some work to do to reach this outcome. So we have to first find a way to dynamically determine where single accounts shall be shown. And also we have to find a way to define KPIs that on top of that show as a percentage and not as a full euro amounts here, for example. And then also we want to show the running total lines with nice blue colors as well. So these are some of the typical challenges that you will see when you have to show profit and loss statements. And the basic setup to come up with a solution like this is very similar to a very old profit and loss approach that you find on my blog that looked like this. Let me show you. So this is a fairly old blog series. There's a couple of blog posts from 2017, but first, I think I started with a series in 2016 already. And there have been some technical limitations in terms of design and functionality that have been overcome meanwhile, fortunately. So if I go back to Power BI, so what I wanted to show you is that back then I could only display the percentage value as decimals. That hasn't been possible back then to show different formats in one column. And also this visual here is not a matrix visual, but this is a simple table visual. And so you cannot drill down into the drill up and down to show just subtotals or accounts with subtotals or not. So what you had to do here is to use a slicer to just see subtotals in this view and just click it up to see all the details. So the tricks that exist today to make this a bit more pleasing is calculation groups to show percentages and full numbers in one column. So here, if we see which check which filters are applied to this visual, you see that we have an account schedule where we just filter the accounts, a date filter, and then we have this filter here, which is called name is P&L. And if I open the filter pane and check where this comes from, we can see that this comes from the table CG format string. And this table here, if we look in the table view, you see this is just a table with one row in it. That's called P&L. And this is a calculation group that has to be defined in an external tool called Tabular Editor. So there's a free version and a paid version to Tabular Editor. And if I open this program here, and click on tables and go to CG format string, calculation group format string, you see that in the folder calculation items, there's one so-called calculation item. And the calculation item has the simplest expression that there is. It's just returns the selected measure. So from what we see here, it should basically doesn't do anything, just show the measure that it is applied to. But the crucial element lies in the format string expression. So if I look at the property format string expression here, we see that we have a DAX expression in here that says if the maximum of the column type from the individual accounts layout table has a certain expression, then format it as a percentage. Otherwise, and then formatted it as a, no, if it is blank, then formatted it as a ordinary whole number. Otherwise, formatted as a percentage. So it applies a condition on this table, individual accounts layout type. And if we check out this table, this individual accounts layout type table, then you will see in the column type here that wherever we have a percentage definition, we have something that we have a value in there. And so wherever we have a value in here, our measure will actually be formatted as a percentage, and otherwise it will be formatted as a whole number. So this is something that is really convenient, I find, now finally being able to apply a conditional format to our measure values. Are there any questions on how to apply calculation groups to measures?
Nothing in the chat at the moment, so don't be
Okay.
shy, everyone. If you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in.
Okay. So this table is basically this individual accounts layout table. This sits at the end of a Snowflake arm. I know we should all do star modeling, the star schema in our Power BI models. I know, but for certain purposes, a Snowflake just does the job. So what's happening here? We have our individual accounts layout table that is connected to an accounts allocation table. That basically is the same table that I've explained when I presented the NAV accounts table. It has an allocation of all accounts to their respective reporting lines, basically. And so there can be multiple accounts in here. And therefore, we have a many-to-one relationship to our chart of accounts, dim accounts table. And the dim accounts table itself has a one-to-many relationship to the fact tables. So we basically go one, many in here. And the filter flows from the one to the many table here naturally by the native relationship here. But we also want the filter from the many accounts table flow down to the chart of accounts table, and therefore we have to apply a bidirectional filter in here. And from there on, the filter will fly down to the fact actuals table. So basically by chaining them all together like this and applying one bidirectional filter in here, we have the convenience that we can choose fields from our accounts layout table where we define how our report should look like, and basically see the correct values in our table, in our report, basically naturally. The only thing that we have to cater for now is to define how we can reach, how we can get the subtotals expanding or not. And this is something that is based on this column here in our accounts table. So here we say we defined if a row in our reports definition table here in our individual accounts table, if a row is actually an account, then it shall be shown, and if not, no accounts shall be shown on the subtotal level. And this is a technique that you can basically, that I've also published a blog already. So this is something that falls under the category of a rect hierarchy, because one parent basically can have many accounts. Excuse me, one child can have many parents. So in our case, the revenues, for example, they will be included in the income subtotal, but they will also be included in our, oh, we don't have a C1 here, I see, in our profit and loss before tax. And the income will also be included in the profit and loss after tax. So our parent-child hierarchy here is of basically of the nature that we have multiple parents, and therefore a certain technique has to be applied, where that I've shamelessly borrowed from the DAX gods, Russo and Ferrari. So in my blog post, you will find a large article from them, where they show you exactly what the challenges are if you want to apply a logic like this, and how to overcome them. So in here, if we see what how our hierarchy measure is defined, we basically check if the current browse depth is less or equal to what is defined in the maximum node depth. And if this condition is fulfilled, then the actual KPI is returned. And if this condition is not fulfilled, then nothing is returned. So then we get these blanks, and therefore subtotals that don't expand any further. And so if we look into the definition, into the actual KPI measure, there we see, let me just zoom in a bit. There we see that we have a switch measure in here that basically checks again, checks what our measure type returns, or if our measure sorry, it basically checks certain conditions here, and it will then return different measures depending on certain conditions. So if the type measure is blank, then it will return the actual sign measure. And if the type again has this KPI in them, it will return the KPI switch measure, and otherwise it will return the KPI divide measure. So what are these measures? One of them is this percentage measure, and this is our KPI divide measure. Let's just see what this does. The KPI divide measure, it will read the values from the type column, and it will then make a division from argument 1 by argument 2. So if we look into the individual accounts layouts table and see how the COGS percentage KPI is defined here, we see that we say in the type column that we have a KPI, and that the first argument will be the measure KPI will be KPI COGS, and if we just see how this is defined, the KPI COGS. Let me just see. Measure KPI COGS. Sorry about it. I just have to check. Sorry. Again, yeah. I must say it has a bit too many bells and whistles, I must say. So I just had to find my track. Sorry about that. So this type. So there are two types of KPIs in there, which I should have simplified a bit, I must admit. So everything you see here, you can find on my blog as well. I will post the links to the blog post where you can download the files as well and read it up a bit. So the KPI for the COGS percentage is the type of KPI switch measure, And here we basically check if the first argument is of this KPI COGS, and then we will basically take this measure. And if it would have been a profit KPI, then we would have taken this measure, and the KPI COGS measure itself, it divides the COGS KPI by the turnover KPI, and the KPI COGS itself basically now is just basically applies the filter on our individual accounts layout table and just filters out those rows that have COGS in the rows. So and then this is a type of KPI where you only have to, in the individual accounts table, where you only have to apply determine one argument, and the second argument will always be the turnover that things will divide it by. And then we also have a different type of KPI. And this is the KPI divide. And if we have a KPI that has the type of divide, you can have to basically determine the nominator and the denominator in argument 1 and argument 2, and then the measure definition will just be slightly different, but not fundamentally. It will just apply filters to according to both measures, basically. So if we go back into the measures table, and here it would then be the measure KPI divide, and there you see that it basically divides two measures by each other, argument 1 and argument 2, which we don't see in here. Okay, some things, for some reason, I cannot show the measure definitions here, but this is something that is basically that you can see here on my blog. So here we have the KPI divide measure with mark1 and mark2, and they are basically have the same filter technique that I've showed before. So this is basically just different methods to define accounts allocations. What's wrong with my Power BI file? So while I try to restore my file, Are there any questions?
I was going to say there's no questions. There was something from Fernando, which I think he was trying to help you out earlier with the KPI script.
yes, thanks.
And thank you from him so far. But no actual questions.
Okay. I think I have to close the file and open it again. Okay, so I think that was basically what I wanted to show you. So if there are no further questions, then aside from the
if people have got
calculate,
questions. I say if people have got questions, now's the chance.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always great if you don't pray to the demo gods before.
Yes, yes. Exactly. Let me just check. Oh yeah, here's another one. So the conditional formatting, I think that is also new, at least. So where do these colors come from? So let me just show you this. So in this report, we just have one measure, and there's some conditional formatting in there, which is background color. And I think we didn't have that back then. Okay, so it even doesn't show which field it is applied on. So let me just go back to the report definition table where all parameters are laid out. So in here we have a new column that is called color. That's the last column in here. And you see that for some rows, I just filled in a color code, and that can then fairly easy be applied to the report. So I believe I had to create a measure for that, but I don't see it. So I go to background color, and then I choose field value. And usually it should show what it is applied, but it looks as if my file got somehow a bit broken slightly. So let's just see what we have in terms of color. So yeah, we have a measure color here. And I believe if I use this is what actually does the trick. So yes, I reapplied it, and we see the color is still there. So the measure is called color. Let's just see where we find that here. And it just checks if a filter is applied on the specific row. And if so, it returns the maximum of the color, and if not, it just returns a blank. And so fairly basic measure that basically returns the color that you've defined in your report definition table. So you can basically put in any color you like and it will then just be applied to this table. So yeah, I think that's all the new tricks that we have at least in this report.
Awesome. There is a comment in here, and I'm assuming they're talking about Power BI file, or I don't know if they're talking about that or the recording, but will the file be shared later?
Yeah, I think I have to make some cleanups in here, and I might. I'm not sure if I will share this file, but there's a lot of files that you can download from my blog already, where you basically find at least most of the techniques in here, I would say.
Brilliant. And there is a question that's just come in from Richard. Can this technique be applied to a balance sheet?
Yes, it really doesn't matter what report you're applying it to. Usually balance sheet reports are a bit easier because they don't require these running totals. But actually, I mean, yeah, you can apply them to balance sheets, of course. That's not a problem. That's not a difference on which kind of accounts you apply them.
And I think one that we may have missed here from Yates, aside from the calc group for formatting, are all the methods you're using coming from the 2016-2017 blog series, or are they new?
So the new elements are is basically only the formatting, the conditional formatting. I think all other techniques are from the old blogs.
And a couple of thank yous, great session, everything coming through. Like I say, big thank you from us. Like I say, it's the first virtual Power BI session that we've had, so it's fantastic to have you, and a great turnout as well. A lot of new faces from all over the globe, by the looks of it. Chicago,
Yeah.
Mexico. We've had from all over, not just sunny Newcastle up in the northeast of England. So it's great to have. Like I say, last chance for anyone who's got any questions. You stay online for another couple of minutes. Glenn, I don't know if there's any words you want to say as a final wrap up.
No, just want to thank everybody for attending. Some lovely comments there as well, Imke, and thank you very much for presenting for us. Awesome.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks. Sorry about the hiccups in the demo, but yeah, I hope it
happens.
Yeah.
It does. Like you say, I'm fully aware of that situation. It's never pleasant, but it happens. It does.
Yeah.
There we go. We've got some people wanting to come to Newcastle now, Glenn. Fantastic city. If you've never been before, it's a great place to go and visit.
Okay. So
awesome. Doesn't look like there's any more questions, I don't think. Like I say, just lots of thanks coming through, and we reiterate that, Imke. Like I say, thank you very much. It's been fantastic, and look forward to the next one on 17th, Glenn, not the 7th.
17th, yeah.
Awesome.
17th.
I think we have a really last minute question here from Mutala. I hope I pronounced that correct. How can we do journal adjustments in the P&L? So the only allowed way to do journal adjustments is to add new rows to your journals. So I hope no one really adjusts their journals, but only add new rows. So you just have to. What I would recommend is okay. If we look at our actuals table here. This is basically, let's assume that this is our journals table. What I would do is in the query editor, I would add a column to the existing journals table where I would say this is the original journal. So if we go to the actuals in here and say, I would call it source or let's call it adjustments. And with regards to the original journal entries, you say no or original. And now we have our actual tables, all entries in our actuals table marked as original. And what you can then do is either create a new table with the same columns like your actual table and do your adjustments in here. And of course, also add a column that's called adjustments. And in there, you will paste actual that this is an adjustment. So imagine you have all the columns here that are similar to your journal entries, but just mark them as adjustments. Then you can fill in all the changes that have to be made in here. And after that, you basically do an append to your actuals table. So I call this table adjustments table. And I go back to my fact actuals and add a new, or I don't have to add a new step. I can just go here to append queries and say, please append my adjustments table to my original bookings table and load that into the model. And that way you can basically see all the adjustments flow in automatically as long as you don't apply any filter. So in my eyes, it's always good to be able to have a filter as well that you can toggle on and off. That allows you to see your figures in their original state or with journal adjustments. But that's basically just a matter of adding additional lines to your actuals table, and doesn't affect the modeling itself. So now in here, in our reports, we could now just drag the adjustments column to the filter pane. I think here original, so it will, if I toggle that on, it would allow me to just see the values from the original journals, and if I toggle that off, I would then see all entries. That's how I would handle adjustments in financial reporting. Did this answer your question, or didn't I understand the question correctly?
I'll tell you what I'll do. allow mic for all attendees so they can unmute
Okay.
themselves if they want to.
Okay. What a thanks. So assuming that this was what has been asked for.
Vitala's come back with thanks, so I'm assuming that means yes.
Okay. Great.
Awesome. They may have even popped up on camera there as well. It is, yes. So yeah, thank you very much everyone for coming. And like you say, we hope to see you again next month on the 17th. And we have recorded this session, and hopefully we'll be able to make the link available to you very soon. So thank you very much to Imke and to everyone for coming, and see you next month.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for your questions. Have a nice evening or nice day wherever you are. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.